Hey yo, welcome back. Developmental Psychology Day 3. We're going to finish talking up about stage theorists. So, yesterday we focused on Jean Piaget and his cognitive theory of development. And today we're going to talk about Erikson, who has the 8 stages of psychosocial development. So, all right, we're moving from 4 to 8 now. So, Erik Erikson, look at him. All these little developmental psychologists are so cute. They look like little grandpas. So Erik Erikson, he developed the 8 psychosocial stages of development. So these kind of sound like Freud's, right? Remember Freud had these psychosexual stages. Erikson has the psychosocial stages. So you're going to feel a little bit of Freud kind of lingering in through Erikson. So he was a little bit inspired by Freud. One way in that he's similar to Freud's psychosexual stages is that in each of his 8 psychosocial stages, Erikson has some kind of crisis that people have to overcome in order to successfully graduate from that stage and move on to the next one. And of course, like we talked about with the fixations and Freud, if you don't successfully graduate from that stage, you will have some kind of problem as a result of that. Because you didn't successfully complete whatever that task or goal you had to get through in that stage. And he's also different from Piaget in that Piaget, as we said, one of the weaknesses is that his stages ended at basically age 12. So while you are essentially saying you're done developing by 12 cognitively, even though you can maybe learn more things, Erikson saying, no, you're socially developing and going through changes all the way through the end of your life into old age. So that's one difference that they have there as well. So let's get started. So Erikson says that the driving force behind his theory is finding our identity. So kind of the overarching goal is to find our identity, and our identity is just our sense of self and who we are. So it's our answer to that question of who am I? How do you see yourself? You see yourself, and then our social identities, which is who we are in relation to the various groups we're a part of, whether it's sports, church, friends, family, our culture, whatever. Right, because it's the psychosocial stage of development. So obviously our social identities are very important in our relations to others in that. So big thing here, like I said, is that each stage you kind of have to accomplish those goals to pass on to the next one. And all of these goals are really tied in with identity in some way, shape, or form, some more than others. But that's kind of the core and overarching goal is to have that positive sense of self accomplished throughout your life. So what we're doing today is I'm going to narrate you through Erik Erikson's various stages, the 8 psychosocial stages of development, as told by Quality Vines that I picked out and spent a lot of time curating. So once you guys finish watching this, you can go through and watch the different vines I chose. So like I said, each stage has some kind of positive goal that you're trying to achieve, and then some kind of negative thing that would result if you aren't successful in overcoming and reaching that goal and moving on to the next stage. So that's why each of these is going to be blank versus blank. So the positive thing, the goal, versus that negative outcome if you don't actually achieve that. So stage 1 is trust versus mistrust, and this is from birth through 1 year old. So what happens in here in stage 1 is that infants really need to feel like they can trust their parents. And we talked about this in day 1 with the attachments, right? The most important thing with those attachments is feeling secure. That's why they called it a secure attachment. You need to feel like you can have that secure base and trust in your parent, and that's what creates a positive attachment. So this all makes sense. So infants need to feel they can trust their parents. They need consistent and reliable care. So if they're crying, they're going to trust their parent if they see that their parent's meeting their needs every time they're crying or giving them their bottle when they're hungry. So a really responsive parent to their needs. If this isn't met, so the mistrust would form. So they might become mistrusting, suspicious, anxious, and they view the world as kind of inconsistent and unpredictable. So they don't have a positive, hopeful view of the world. They're not very trusting. So they're going to have a negative outlook on things. But if it's successfully met, right, trust, they're going to have a sense of hope in the world. And you can see this here. We got trust, and we have a positive relationship with a dad and daughter. You can watch here. And mistrust, this dad tells his son not to trust anyone and drops him from a ladder, teaching him an important lesson. So stage 2, we have autonomy versus shame and self-doubt. And this is from a year-old to 3 years. So this is when children are really trying to, autonomy means to kind of be able to do things on your own. So children are trying to become autonomous and independent and do things for themselves. So think about what you know about 1 to 3-year-olds, right? They're really trying to do things. So I remember I got, when I was a little kid, my mom gave me a little, I got like a motorcycle outside here. When I was a little kid, my mom gave me a little ribbon like, oh, you dressed yourself, right? So it's a big deal to show that independence of things like getting dressed, learning to feed yourself, learning to do things for yourself. So children need to be encouraged in learning these new skills, right? So you don't want to be doing all the things as a parent. You don't want to do it all for them. They're never going to learn. But you also want to encourage them in a positive way and don't make them feel scared or inadequate and yell at them too much for that. So that happy medium. So if it's not met and say the parents are being really too lax and doing everything for them or making them feel doubtful and bad about themselves if they mess up and yelling at them, kids are going to feel inadequate. They're going to lack confidence and have poor and negative self-esteem. But if this is successfully met, then they're going to gain the virtue of will, which is kind of confidence in our ability to be independent and survive out in the real world. So they're going to feel confident in themselves and their abilities to, do things and learn things like these skills of getting dressed and be independent. So successful, they're independent. If not, they're going to lack self-esteem and maybe will be even too reliant on people to do things for them because they don't feel like they can do it for themselves. And our vines here. So we have this one isn't a vine, but this kid, he's spilling everything. He's trying to get juice for himself, but he's, positive and has a good outlook. So even though he's messing up, right, you're still learning. There's positivity. So he'll probably overcome this stage in a positive manner. And this kid here is trying to, lift weights by himself. And he has confidence, you're going to see. So he'll meet that stage properly. But this kid was trying to do something, looks like washing the floor, and then his mom yelled at him. So he might have some shame and self-doubt and might not properly exit that stage. So you can watch that there. I would play these for you guys here, but the volume doesn't work from inside my computer, so you won't be able to hear them, and that's no fun. So stage 3 is initiative versus guilt, which is ages 3 to 6 years old. So this is going on around preschool time. So what do they do in preschool? All about playing with your friends. So this is kind of centered around playing and meeting people. And initiative, it's using initiative to independently create and carry out plans. So this involves preschoolers trying to create plans when it comes to their play. So maybe they're playing house or playing a game. It's their ability to kind of create their own plans and things and activities. And this is also when kids are really curious and they always ask that question, why to everything? The sky's blue. Why? Because I said so. Why? So they're very curious. So parents could potentially harm their children here by kind of squashing their curiosity and making them feel guilty, and that results in the guilt. Or if they're not encouraged to develop their own initiative to plan things, again, they're going to feel guilty if they're not encouraged in what they're doing and criticized. So if parents are too controlling or criticizing, then they're going to feel guilty for this and then not want to try and go out on their own to make these plans. But if they're successfully met and parents are, open and letting them be more dependent but encouraging, children are going to feel a sense of purpose, right? So when you're planning, you're putting a purpose out there. So kids are going to feel that purpose and being able to plan. So we have here an initiative, little toddler asking why and is hopefully being encouraged by her family. And then we have guilt because we got someone yelling for asking things and trying to do things on their own way. So they're being overly criticized. So this would result in a child feeling guilty. Then we have stage 4, industry versus inferiority. And they also call this industry as like a synonym for competence. So this is age 6 through puberty. So you can think like elementary school age. So here, think they're in elementary school. They're learning how to do different tasks, whether it be reading, learning math equations, doing sports, anything like that. So children really are about showing off at this age and wanting to show competency. So their ability to master these skills and do a good job with these various things that they're learning, right? Because think about elementary school and all the kids would be like, oh my gosh, like I can count to 100. Whoa, right? So it was a very big deal if you could do certain things or like say words in different languages. They're all trying to show off because they want to show that they have industry or competence in their skills. So they really want approval from their friends because they're always trying to show off. They're in school, so this is when they start really turning to their peers for approval more so than their parents. So if this stage isn't met, so maybe they feel let down by their friends and they're not good enough, they're going to feel incompetence, inferior, like they're not good enough, they're going to have low self-esteem. But if it's successfully met, they're going to feel competent and confident in their different abilities. So they'll move on feeling good about themselves. So industry, you'd have this girl's very confident in her ability to sing, and it's showing off here. And then my example here of a kid always trying to show off her knowledge about American Girl dolls. And then we have inferiority because the girl she's talking to, Marlene, does not have good self-esteem. And then stage 5 is identity versus role confusion. So this is what you guys are in right now as teenagers. So this is teenagers trying to answer the question of who am I? And this makes sense because this is just like every teenager's like identity crisis. So who am I? What's my purpose? You're trying to figure out, do I want to go to college? Do I want to join the trades? Like, what's my pathway? Everyone's asking. You feel a lot of pressure. Right? You're trying to figure out that who am I? Like, what is my role in life? What are my beliefs, like politically, religiously, spiritually, whatever, your dreams, interests, goals, and your overall identity. So what's my role in the world? And if this isn't met, you might feel kind of lost, confused, or aimless and stressed out about that, right? Or if you're kind of pushed into an identity, right, your parents are pushing you too much to do something, you could rebel then. But if this is successfully met, and you feel like you have found that thing that kind of drives you and defines who you are, and you are confident in that question of who am I, you're going to have a positive and strong sense of identity and self, and that'll be healthy. So we have here, I love this little girl. She's so funny. So she's saying, looking flawless like my dream. So she knows what she wants to do in life and is confident. I couldn't find just this one, but I put a whole compilation here if you want to look at it, because she's really fun. And then we have role confusion. This girl's freaking out about college. So maybe she's stressed and doesn't know what her major is and is having like a crisis. And then we have stage 6, which is intimacy versus isolation. So this is from like your 20s, mid-20s to early 40s. So now you kind of have figured out what you're doing. I talked about kind of the cross between the identity versus role confusion and the intimacy versus isolation in my scrapbook example. So you can look at that. So now you kind of, you're confident in who you are once you graduate from this identity versus role confusion stage. So you kind of know what your goal in life is, who you are, what your interests are, and your sense of self. But now you're trying to extend outward and form relations with other people in this stage. So this is young adulthood. You're trying to form intimate relationships, and intimacy doesn't have to always be what we think of as like sexual intimacy. When they're talking about it in psychology, it's more like close relationships. So it could be romantic, or it could be just like a deep emotional relationship. So then they're trying to form intimate relationships and gain the capacity to love and really join your identity with someone else. So kind of have a joint identity and find that other person. So if this isn't met, you'd feel isolated, loneliness, and sometimes depression. If this is successfully met, like I said, you can have that healthy joint identity and find a happy, healthy, and committed relationship. So intimacy here, we have weird relationships in high school that are very close and awkward. Then we have, I don't even know if that's healthy though, but then we have isolation. You're lonely and isolated and sad and alone. Then we have stage 7, which is generativity versus stagnation. And this is in your 40s through 60s, so middle adulthood. So this is where you're trying to, contribute to the world. So you kind of figured out yourself. You've got your like partner or whatever, and now you're trying to figure out like what's like how do I leave my legacy in the world? Like how am I going to contribute to society? And this is typically through things like family. So that's why it's generativity. You're trying to like generate, kids and people that are going to live on beyond you, or through your work, or volunteering or whatever. So trying to figure out like how are you leaving your mark on the world. If this isn't met, you're going to feel useless or unproductive, right? Like your life is lacking meaning because you haven't really contributed anything. If this is successfully met, though, then you're going to feel, feelings of usefulness or accomplishment. So you're going to feel like you contributed and are successful and you have a purpose in this world. So generativity, we have the Kardashians here because they are leaving a long legacy, whether, I don't know if it is the most positive one, but they're contributing through their family. Because often they want to create things that are outlasting you, that are going to kind of carry on, right? Kids do that. And then stagnation. So this is Carla, and she says that she doesn't need friends. They disappoint her. So she's sad because she hasn't been productive and hasn't contributed by making a family or putting things beyond her. Then stage 8, final stage, is integrity versus despair. So this is your late 60s up through death. So this is the stage where you're kind of reflecting on your life, right? You're not really doing too much anymore. You're older, you're retired maybe, but you're kind of thinking like, have I lived the best life possible? Am I happy with what I've achieved, what I've accomplished, and what I'm leaving behind? So if you have not met this, you're going to feel guilt and despair because you wasted your life. You're going to feel like you didn't live your life to the fullest and reach your full potential. But if this is successfully met, you're going to feel content and satisfied with the life you lived, have that sense of completeness and satisfaction with your life, and gain wisdom and share that with others. And you're going to accept death without fear because you feel like you lived a full life and are satisfied. But if someone here hasn't met this, they might be afraid of death because they feel like they have more to do that they didn't get to do. So integrity, this lady is just living her best life because she has contributed to the world so she can enjoy her retirement and dance about guacamole. Then we have despair here. She's yelling, she's angry, saying, "Get the F off my lawn," because maybe she's in despair because she didn't actually live her life to the fullest. So that is Erikson's 8 psychosocial stages. So you can see again that there is some Freudian and that you're trying to overcome things, and that there's the challenges you have in each stage. And also Freud talks about like id and ego and things like that, right? It's a lot tied with your ego. So finishing up with that, you can tie this in with your developmental scrapbook. I'm asking you guys to work on applying each of Erikson's 8 stages through your scrapbook. And obviously, you're not going to have, actual things to contribute for something like integrity versus despair, because you're not in your 60s yet. But the fun thing about that part of the project is you guys get to pretend and envision your future. So dream big and think about what your life's going to look like then. And then you can read mods 51 and 54. All right. Have a nice day, you guys. So, of course, you can go back and watch these vines on the actual Google Slides.